When the FBI stepped through the doors of Frank Fritz's sprawling Iowa estate, they expected antiques, motorcycles, oil cans, old toys maybe. But they didn't expect that. Hidden beneath layers of dust, wedged between relics of American history, was something else entirely. They found a hidden door. Behind it, not just a room, but a chamber sealed off from the world. A vault, soundproof, locked from the inside. Inside the vault, dozens of boxes, each marked with red tape, each one numbered, each containing fragments of a story no one was meant to know. A story that could shake the foundation of everything we thought we knew about Frank Fritz, the TV star, the collector, the man America thought it had figured out. Among those boxes were handwritten diaries, unreleased videotapes, and sealed envelopes marked, "Do not open." And that's only the beginning. What triggered the FBI to even go there? Who tipped them off? And what was Frank hiding that needed a steel vault, soundproof walls, and coded locks? If you think you knew Frank Fritz, this story will make you question everything. Stick around, because what the FBI found inside Frank's mansion is more than just rare motorcycles or forgotten collectibles. It's a window into a man's secrets, a trail of betrayal, and a final message the world was never meant to hear. After Frank left American Pickers, he faded into what many thought was quiet retirement, but neighbors began to whisper, mail piled up, lights flickered at odd hours, surveillance cameras appeared along the property line, and those who knew him best said something had changed. Frank wasn't just isolating, he was preparing. He had stopped attending public events, pulled back from friends, even those closest to him. For years, he'd been a beloved figure on television, the calm, collected half of the treasure-hunting duo that defined a generation of antique lovers. But now, his house was shuttered, his phone often disconnected. His once vibrant store, Frank's Finds, was locked permanently. Locals said he spent hours in his basement. Others said he was working on a private archive, but those closest to him believed he was hiding from something. In public, Frank appeared reclusive, yes, but in private, something else was happening, a transformation. One neighbor said she saw him bringing in crates late at night, heavy wooden boxes, no labels, delivered by unmarked vans. Was it just antiques, or was it something more? After suffering health scares, surgeries, and a public fallout with his co-star Mike Wolfe, Frank's life grew quieter, more secretive. His social media accounts fell silent. Family members stopped visiting. It was almost like he was erasing himself in real time. But no one imagined that behind the walls of that old estate, Frank was building something, cataloging something, preserving something, until the FBI showed up, and then the whole town realized whatever Frank had been hiding, it wasn't just about collectibles anymore. It was about truth. And someone, somewhere, wanted that truth buried forever. Long before the FBI raid, signs of trouble began to surface. Frank, once cheerful and accessible, had become visibly paranoid. He installed 3 different home security systems. Some cameras were fake, decoys. Others were state-of-the-art, motion-triggered, with infrared. His inner circle grew smaller. Former friends claimed he stopped returning calls. One even said it was like he thought someone was after him. And maybe he did. Because somewhere along the line, Frank started documenting everything, his interactions, his deliveries, even conversations with his lawyer. He kept receipts, backup drives, audio tapes, most of them labeled with specific names and dates. And then came the biggest red flag. He told someone, "If anything happens to me, go to the northeast wall. There's a hidden latch." At the time, they thought he was being dramatic, maybe even losing touch. But when the FBI found the latch, hidden behind a false panel in the brickwork, it was clear. Frank knew something, or feared something, enough to leave instructions behind. In those final years, he stopped trusting people, especially those closest to him. He'd been betrayed once on national television, left out of episodes, edited into obscurity. He'd been pushed from the show he helped build, and it broke something inside him. He told one friend, "This whole thing, it was never just about antiques. It's what they let me see." What did he mean? To some, it sounded like rambling, but in hindsight, it might have been the beginning of the mystery the FBI would one day be forced to untangle. And the mansion? That wasn't just his home anymore. It had become a bunker. It started with an envelope, unmarked, postmarked from Des Moines, delivered to a local field office of the FBI. Inside was a single note typed in courier font. "Check the basement. He kept everything, even the ones you're looking for." No signature, no return address. At first, they dismissed it. Cranks mail the FBI all the time, but then came a second tip, this time through a secure line. The voice was calm, low, confident. "He documented everything. You're going to want to see what's in the northeast wing. Don't wait too long." When investigators ran a background check, they discovered multiple red flags. Financial activity linked to accounts Frank supposedly hadn't touched in years. Unusual insurance transfers. Digital storage purchases routed through multiple proxy servers. The Bureau was compelled to act. A federal judge signed a quiet search warrant citing potential misappropriation of estate funds and interstate evidence tampering. But when they arrived, accompanied by a local sheriff and 2 agents from financial crimes, they weren't prepared for what they walked into. The property was in near-perfect order on the outside. But once inside, they encountered layers of disarray. Catalogs of artifacts stacked like museum inventory, entire rooms filled with old film reels, motorcycles, sealed trunks, and unmarked VHS tapes. And then the floor gave way, literally. One of the officers stepped on a loose board near the fireplace. Beneath it, a crawl space. A wire led from that space directly into a concealed circuit panel, one not documented in the home's official blueprints. Whatever Frank was building down there, it wasn't part of the original plan. That's when they knew this wasn't just a collector's estate. It was an intelligence archive inside Frank's estate. Nothing was random. Every object was labeled, tagged, dated. The FBI began photographing the rooms, standard procedure. But in doing so, they uncovered patterns, codes, entire walls of numbers carved faintly into the plaster behind shelves. Every wall had been double reinforced with insulation, some of it lined with copper mesh. One agent said, "It looked like a Faraday cage," like he didn't want anyone to hear or see what was inside. In the main living area, they found dozens of flash drives, all identical, not stored with his antiques or records, but tucked away inside a hollowed-out copy of Moby Dick. Then came the safe room. It wasn't on any floor plan, but a switch behind a 1950s Coke machine clicked open a rotating panel, and inside, a 12 by 12 chamber with biometric locks. Once cracked, the room revealed 2 things that made the lead agent pause. First, rows of black binders, each one labeled not with titles, but with names. And second, a desk, empty except for a tape recorder and a note taped beside it. "For whoever finds this, listen before you judge." They pressed play. A voice came through, hoarse, raspy, but unmistakably Frank's. "If you're hearing this, I'm either gone or someone crossed the line." He paused. "I kept the evidence because no one else would. They told me to destroy it. I didn't. I couldn't." Then silence. And just as the tape clicked off, another door inside the vault popped open. They hadn't found the secret yet. They'd only found the front porch. Beyond the vault, the FBI stumbled into a hallway no one expected. It was built behind a false wall, camouflaged with sliding antique display panels. The room itself felt like a museum, with items laid out under glass, spotlit from above. But this wasn't open to the public, and the tags weren't what you'd expect. Under a rusted fire helmet, recovered from abandoned Detroit station. Witnessed 1973 arson cover-up, next to a cracked film reel, "Do not screen. Original master never aired." One item was wrapped entirely in black plastic, duct-taped closed. A single label in red, "Evidence." Chain broken, handle with gloves. Everything felt curated, chosen, protected. But the real mystery sat at the end of the hallway, a door with no handle, seamless, smooth, almost invisible. Agents knocked, no sound. One tried pressing on different panels, nothing. Then someone noticed the light, a faint flicker pulsing from a vent near the floor. They pried it open. What they saw made everyone step back. Inside was a camera, live. Someone, somewhere, had been watching. The lens still blinking, the system still powered. This wasn't a vault anymore, it was a surveillance hub. And what was on the other side of that door? The agents would have to call in a specialist to find out. It took nearly 4 hours to get the hidden vault open. Technicians brought in thermal scanners, digital decoders, and forensic tools. The door was layered in titanium alloy, far beyond what anyone would expect from a TV star's private residence. When it finally clicked open, a blast of cool air rushed out. The room was silent, undisturbed, and far darker than the rest of the house. Inside, a single desk, a metal shelf, a row of servers, and a series of meticulously labeled boxes, each containing old audio reels, typewritten letters, and faded photographs. The shelf contained backup drives going back nearly 20 years. Some were labeled with company names. Others simply said confidential or archive. But the strangest find: a framed image of Frank standing with two men in suits. One was clearly Mike Wolfe, the other a man no one could identify. On the back of the photo, in Frank's handwriting, "They told me to forget. I didn't." A hidden drawer under the desk held a flash drive. When agents opened it back at the lab, they found files, PDFs, recordings, call logs, documents naming individuals in high places, some associated with media, others with law enforcement. This wasn't just a collector's hobby. This was whistleblower-level documentation, a shadow archive built in secret, under everyone's noses, and at the center of it all, Frank Fritz. Not just a picker, not just a collector, but a man who saw too much and couldn't let it go. Inside the smallest box in the hidden vault was something the agents weren't expecting: a dozen cassette tapes, labeled only by date. The oldest was from 2006, the newest just months before Frank's stroke. Each one was marked with a single word: confession. When they played the first tape, Frank's voice was subdued, hesitant, like someone practicing for a conversation he'd never get to have. I didn't plan to keep any of it, but they said things that didn't sit right. He named no names, but referenced calls made after filming, strange payments routed through shell accounts, and the people behind the cameras. On later tapes, his voice sounded more anxious, paranoid. They watched everything, not just the show, my house, my store, even my friends. I know how it sounds, but you'd be paranoid too if you saw what I saw. He talks about an argument with someone from production, a dispute over an item that was never meant to be aired. He says they made him sign papers, threatened to cut him out. Most chillingly, he ends the final tape with, "If this gets found, it's because I didn't make it. And if that's the case, there's more." And there was. Journals, folders of clipped articles, notes scribbled in the margins, some written while he was clearly in physical pain, possibly even after his stroke. Frank wasn't just documenting. He was leaving a trail, a breadcrumb path for someone to follow, someone he hoped would listen when he no longer could. The journals were brutal. Some were full of detailed item notes, serial numbers, provenance, historic details. But between those pages were entries written like a man trying to hold on to his sanity. Every time I close my eyes, I see them going through my things. That room isn't safe. It never was. They know I didn't burn the film. I still have the original, but they want to shut me up. Mike doesn't understand. He thinks this is about money. It's not. It never was. In another entry, he writes, "If you're reading this, you're either very brave or in serious danger. Either way, don't trust what they tell you. It's always been bigger than picking." His final journal, dated just days before his collapse, was more of a letter, a message to someone unnamed. "I forgive you. You did what you had to. Just know I still kept everything. Even that box you told me to burn. It's in the vault." The pages were warped, the handwriting shaky, trailing off mid-sentence. But the message was clear. Frank believed he was being hunted, not for money, not for fame, for what he refused to destroy. And now, with those materials in FBI custody, the question was no longer if Frank had been paranoid, but whether he'd been right all along. So who was Frank really hiding from? In the evidence logs, names appeared, some redacted, others shockingly clear. A production executive with ties to a defunct reality show network, a former law enforcement officer involved in a Midwest trafficking bust, even a figure connected to a historic missing person case from the early 2000s, one that had quietly disappeared from headlines. Frank had been researching them all. And what tied them together? That remains unclear. But Frank's records show common threads: real estate transactions, offshore banking activity, untraceable donations rooted through nonprofits. In one folder marked "Connect the Dots," Frank had drawn diagrams, arrows between companies, circled initials, and in bold at the center, "Too many coincidences." The FBI began to suspect this wasn't just about stolen collectibles or hidden wealth. It might have been about stories, real ones, that someone wanted erased. Why would a man with millions, a hit TV show, and a cult following spend his final years building a personal intelligence archive? Unless he knew something no one else dared speak out loud. And unless someone wanted to make sure he never did. Back at headquarters, the FBI was stunned. They weren't expecting a simple estate investigation to turn into an intelligence operation. But that's what it had become. Frank's materials included footage from unaired episodes, internal production emails, whistleblower testimonies from former crew members, and at least one encrypted file that required a federal-level decryption tool. What was inside? A compilation of voice recordings, alleged payoffs, alleged coercion contracts, mentions of network executives, some no longer in the business, others still very much active. The FBI's internal summary described the situation as an unconventional cache of media and personal intelligence artifacts, potentially relevant to multiple cases under sealed review. In simpler terms, Frank had built a private vault of evidence that might link to open investigations across at least 3 states. One agent noted, "It's the kind of thing you'd expect from a journalist, not a reality show host." Frank wasn't looking for fame at the end of his life. He was looking for accountability. But there was a problem. Many of the people named in his files were either deceased, disappeared, or had legal teams that could bury anything in procedural mud for years. Still, the Bureau kept digging. They dispatched archivists to carefully process each artifact. They ran handwriting analyses on the journals. They even subpoenaed a few parties mentioned in the redacted tapes, but the deeper they went, the more they realized. Frank might have been paranoid, but he was also probably right. And now that his archive was public record, everyone else was watching too. It didn't take long for the press to get wind of it. The leak came from inside, possibly a contractor, maybe even a local law enforcement official, but the story broke like a thunderclap. FBI discovers secret vault inside Frank Fritz's estate. In hours, every major network picked it up. Talk shows speculated. YouTube exploded with theories. Reddit threads ran wild, dissecting every name mentioned, every blurry photo released. Frank's old fans were divided. Some said he was clearly unwell, that this was a sad epilogue to a once beloved figure. Others believed it all, every tape, every theory, every secret. Hashtags like #F, Fritz Files, and #What Frank Knew began trending. But the real pressure wasn't on the fans. It was on the network, the one that aired American Pickers for over a decade. Questions started flying. What did they know? When did they know it? Why was Frank written out of so many episodes? A former crew member anonymously told a podcast, "There was always weird stuff." He kept to himself. But yeah, there were whispers. By the end of the week, the FBI had to issue a public statement, neither confirming nor denying the existence of a broader investigation. And through it all, one truth lingered. Frank's voice, on those tapes, in those journals, felt less like the ramblings of a man slipping away and more like the voice of someone who'd been warning us the entire time. The world just hadn't been listening. Then came the lawsuits. Frank's estranged father, William Fritz, filed a legal motion contesting the will. He claimed the documents submitted in 2023 were forged and that he had been wrongfully excluded. The estate, worth over $6 million, was frozen. The court ordered a full audit. But that wasn't the only battle. A separate suit emerged, this time from a former business associate of Frank's. He claimed co-ownership over several of the rare artifacts discovered by the FBI. His claim? That Frank had promised him partial rights to the archive. The courtroom became a circus. Lawyers argued over handwritten notes, audio tapes, and time-stamped receipts found in Frank's hidden vault. Media outlets covered the case live. The Frank Fritz files became the subject of a 3-part docuseries by an independent filmmaker. Public opinion was split. Some saw a man unfairly demonized after death. Others saw a complicated figure, a man who may have crossed legal lines in his quest for justice. But the biggest bombshell came from the FBI's own analysis. They found an unsigned draft of a second will, never notarized but clearly authored by Frank, that left his entire estate to be donated to a whistleblower protection nonprofit. It was a wish never fulfilled, and now everyone, from former co-workers to distant cousins, was trying to get a piece. What started as a quiet investigation had become a fight over legacy, truth, and money. And Frank wasn't there to defend himself. People are still arguing about it. Was Frank trying to expose something real? Or was this the elaborate creation of a man battling loneliness and decline? Psychologists weighed in. One said, "The journals show signs of both acute paranoia and extreme cognitive clarity. It's rare to see both." Others weren't so sure. It's possible he was manipulated, that someone fed him information. But his friends, those who knew him in his prime, said this wasn't about mental health. This was Frank being Frank, one said. He never threw anything away, not memories, not evidence, not truth. And that may be the key. Frank lived like a historian. He collected the past, not just to own it, but to protect it. So maybe this wasn't a cover-up. Maybe it was a message, a final act by a man who felt he'd been silenced, and decided in his own quiet way to make sure his story couldn't be buried with him. Frank Fritz died without fanfare. No funeral broadcast, no public memorial. Just a few close friends, some distant family, and one handwritten note left by his bedside. Tell the truth, even when they say not to. But after the discovery at his mansion, that note has taken on new meaning. Frank left behind more than antiques. He left behind questions, thousands of them, notes that don't make sense, files with no context, faces with no names. And yet, he also left a story of a man who refused to look away, who saw things in America's attic that weren't meant to be found, who documented pain, preserved injustice, and tried against all odds to hand that story to someone willing to listen. Whether or not the FBI ever makes the full archive public, one thing is clear. Frank Fritz wasn't just a collector of objects. He was a collector of buried truth. And in death, his voice is louder than ever. What do you think about Frank's legacy and the mystery he left behind? Was he a misunderstood visionary, or a man lost in his own suspicions? Leave a 1 in the comments if you believe Frank was trying to warn us, or a 0 if you think it's just another tragic story taken too far. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories just like this. Because sometimes the real truth isn't found in plain sight. It's hidden, waiting, in someone's forgotten vault.